Welcome back for another towpath walk, this time along the Kennet and Avon Canal. The initial 18.5 miles follows the River Kennet from Reading to Newbury, made navigable between 1718 and 1723 when 11 sections of canal were added. By the 1950s it was derelict and earmarked for closure. Restored by volunteers and reopened by the Queen in 1990, the first part of the walk takes us from Reading to Aldermaston Wharf. The River Kennet runs through Reading from the Thames, but it's only here at High Bridge that the Canal and River Trust takes over its jurisdiction, and it becomes the Kennet and Avon Canal. Initially you pass through a modern retail area, a familiar landscape in any similar sized town. For 200 years until 1980, Simon's Brewery operated where these shiny new buildings now stand. I know which one I prefer, but that's progress, I suppose. You soon, however, leave TK Maxx and Hollywood Bowl behind, and passing the anchorage, you reach County Lock. This unattractive bridge spoils the view as you walk through the green fringes of Reading. With housing reaching down to the water. You pass the usual detritus, old bikes and trolleys that have been dragged out of the water, and then you'll encounter a disconcerting barbed wire fence. The odd boat passes, but it's generally an unexceptional but not unpleasant walk until reaching Fobney pumping station, which opened in April 1878. Designed to provide clean water to the growing Reading population, millions of gallons of water were taken from the Kennet every day, originally by steam engine. The water was then treated at nearby filter beds before piping to 2 reservoirs. It has now been superseded by the more modern facility you passed earlier, guarded by the barbed wire. Cross the bridge at Lock 105 to Fobney Island Wetland Nature Reserve, a twitcher's delight with 15 acres of wetland, wildflower and hay meadows and reed beds. Walking continues to be easy until you reach Fobney Labyrinth Weir. Hopefully whoever was in the remains of this canoe got out in time. This was once someone's pride and joy. Unlike railway bridges, all the wooden footbridges such as milkmaids seem to enhance the waterway's attraction, and signs start to appear that you are following the Camino Ingles de Santiago. No, I don't know either. This modern residence occupies the site of the Southcote Mill and Waterworks, which pumped water from the Kennet to be filtered at the Bath Road Reservoir in Reading until 1982. Following Southcote Lock, there's a long straight stretch of canal while the river meanders elsewhere. Now boats and wide beams are moored on the approach to Burghfield Island, which has been created by the interweaving canal and river. This symbiotic relationship has resulted in the many sluices and weirs that need to be traversed, and there are other menaces that need to be avoided. Judging by the amount of signage, this must be one of the most dangerous waterways in the country for both boaters and walkers. If any refreshment is required, there's the Cunning Man pub that takes its name from a good-natured wizard who protected people from evil spirits. The current pub has a large garden, and its predecessor, the Swan Inn, and an adjoining blacksmith's, once stood in its car park. It's typical that, not having seen a moving boat for a while, two come along at the same time under the Swan overhead bridge. The waterway splits to form an island where Burghfield corn mill was once located. It's now a very private, out-of-view housing estate. The towpath then becomes a footpath that wanders off on its own across open fields. But just after it becomes an attractive woodland path, your peaceful walk is interrupted by the M4. A series of large lakes now come into view. These wide expanses of water have been created by old gravel workings and will periodically accompany the river all the way to Newbury. Garston Lock is a little more interesting than your average lock. It was built with turf sides, and there's a framework of GWR broad gauge rails. The only other remaining example on the canal is Monkey Marsh Lock, which we'll pass in part 2. Originally the chamber was built from timber, however the sloping turf sides demanded more water than a standard lock, and getting on and off boats was difficult. This means all but 2 have now been replaced by stone and brick. The lock gates also operate differently. The lower set has hydraulic paddles, while the upper paddles are mechanical. If that wasn't enough for a lock nerd, there are 2 pillboxes guarding this scheduled ancient monument. You'll pass more pillboxes later, although I don't think Lawrence Llewellyn Bowen was employed as the interior decorator on the others. Next up is Sheffield Lock, which, like Aldermaston, which we'll pass later, features unusual scallop sides which were extended to the top of the chamber in the 1980s. Sailboats glide by on the adjacent lake, a body of water also favoured by wild swimmers. Further on is the Sheffield Lock Swing Bridge. where boaters can hold up traffic by the simple expedient of turning a BW key and pressing a button. A canal must have a heron, and this one is eyeing up his dinner. He probably wouldn't be welcome inside this private fishery, which is protected by a very long and very high fence. The towpath narrows as you pass Sulhamstead Lock, the first lock to be rebuilt when the canal was restored. And then the next spring bridge. This weir marks the point where the canal rejoins the Kennet once more, and then winds to another cut and a further swing bridge. A lock as well as a pillbox used to accompany Ofton swing bridge, but it was never restored. We bump into the railway before turning to Townley Lock 97, where this high boat needs to be held steady with a rope. Thousands of gallons of water surge into the lock every minute. The shaded towpath now leads you to Padworth Swing Bridge. We then arrive at Aldermaston Wharf. Now best known as a base for ABC hire boats, after the canal was completed to Newbury, the wharf became a busy transshipment location, and when the GWR took over ownership, they built this spur to the Berks and Hants Railway. A former malt house stands opposite the tea rooms where a cuppa might come in handy as we approach Aldermaston Lift Bridge and Lock. Until the early 50s, Strange's Brewery stood next to what was once known as Brewhouse Lock. It's now called Aldermaston Lock, and its scallop sides, replicated at Sheffield Lock, are unique to the Kennet and Avon. We finish part one of the walk here, watching an ABC boat, little turn, leaving the lock and then going under the raised Aldermaston Lift Bridge towards the wharf. Please like and subscribe before checking out my other walks along the Grand Union, Oxford, Stratford and Worcester and Birmingham canals, together with the Birmingham Canal navigations. I'll see you on another towpath soon.